Hello, hello. Cooey. How are we all today? And look at this. How lucky are we? For the final part of Nutcracker and the Mouse King, Pam has decided to make an appearance. She just came up and sat on my lap. She'll probably jump off any minute. That's what cats are like. Do whatever they want. But I do love her. There's Wendy about as well somewhere. She might make an appearance. Any road up. So it's the final part of Nutcracker and the Mouse King. And Sue had a double whammy. She had a double episode last time in the toy capital. And the last thing that we knew, Mary was higher. There you go, you see, she's just jumped off. Does whatever she wants, that one. But we are now in the conclusion, so are you ready? Settle in and let's get going. Down fell Mary from a measureless height. That was a fall. But at once she opened her eyes, and there she lay on her little bed in clear daylight, and her mother stood beside her, saying, "How can you sleep so long? Breakfast has been ready long ago." You take notice, honoured reader, watcher, listener, that Mary, quite bewildered by all the wonderful things she saw, had at last fallen asleep in the hall of Rock Castle, and that the boys, or the pages, or the princesses, with their own hands, must have brought her home and put her to bed. "Oh, mother, dear mother, wherever has young Herr Drosselmeyer taken me through the night? What fine things I have seen!" And then she told the whole story, almost exactly as I and Sue have told you. But her mother just looked at her in amazement. "Dear Mary," said her mother when she came to the end, "you have had a long, beautiful dream. But now shake all of that out of your head." Mary obstinately stuck to it that she had not been dreaming, but had really seen all this. So her mother took her to the glass cupboard, brought down Nutcracker from the third shelf, where he stood as usual, and said, "How can you, silly child, believe that these wooden figures from Nuremberg are alive and able to move of themselves?" "But, dear mother," broke in Mary, "I know very well that the small Nutcracker is young Herr Drosselmeyer of Nuremberg, Godfather Drosselmeyer's nephew." At this, both her mother and father broke into a loud peal of laughter. Don't know what Pam's up to. "Ah," Mary went on, almost in tears, "now you are laughing at my Nutcracker, dear father, and yet he spoke of you so well. For when we came to Rock Castle, he introduced me to the princesses, his sisters, and he said that you are a very respectable physician." Louder still was the laughter, in which Louisa, her older sister, joined, and even Fred. Then Mary ran into the next room, made haste to bring out of her small treasure box the 7 crowns of the Mouse King, and handed them to her mother with, "Just see here. These are the Mouse King's 7 crowns, which last night young Drosselmeyer presented to me as tokens of his victory." With astonishment, the doctor's wife examined the little crowns, which were so skilfully made out of a very bright metal, quite unfamiliar to her, that they seemed the work of no human hands. The doctor, too, took a good long look at them, and both mother and father seriously urged Mary to confess how she had come by these crowns. But she would only stand by what she'd said, and when her father grew stern with her, even scolded her as a little storyteller, well, she began to cry bitterly and to lament. "Oh, poor child that I am! What else can I say?" At that moment, the door opened and in walked the counsellor, calling out, "Oh, what's the matter? My godchild Mary crying and sobbing. What's the matter? What's the matter?" The doctor told him the whole story, showing him the little crowns. No sooner had the counsellor set eyes on them than he laughed and said, "Oh, silly stuff, silly stuff. These are the charms which long ago I used to wear on my watch chain. and I gave them to Mary as a present on her birthday when she was 2 years old. Don't you remember them?" Neither the doctor nor his wife did remember them, but when Mary saw that the faces of her parents had become friendly again, she sprang upon Godfather Drosselmeyer with the cry, "Oh, Godfather, you know all about it. Do tell them yourself that my Nutcracker is your nephew, the young Herr Drosselmeyer from Nuremberg, and that he gave me the little crowns." "Stupid, silly stuff," muttered the counsellor, making an ugly face. Then her mother made Mary stand before her and spoke very seriously. "Just listen to me, Mary. You must be done with all these fancies and absurdities, and if you say again that this common misshaped Nutcracker is the nephew of Mr. Counsellor, I will not only throw Nutcracker out of the window, but the rest of all your toys, Miss Clara included." Now, indeed, poor Mary could no longer speak of that which filled her whole mind, for you may well suppose that such splendid and beautiful things as had happened to her are not to be forgotten. Even Fred turned his back on her when she tried to tell him of the wonderful land in which she had been so fortunate. He is even said to have whispered, "Silly goose." But the good nature he showed her at other times will not let me believe this. Yet so much is certain that, since he no longer put any faith in Mary's story, formally, upon parade, he retracted the wrong done to his hussars. Because you remember, he cut off the plumes from their hats and gave them, instead of their lost cockades, such higher and finer feathers from a goose quill, and permitted them to play the Hussars' Guards' March again. Well, we know what courage these hussars had shown when the mouse balls came whistling at their red waistcoats. Do you remember? They turned round and ran off. Mary might speak no more of her adventure, but that marvellous fairy kingdom still hovered around her in sweetly fleeting visions and beautiful echoes. She saw in all its glories once more as soon as she fixed her mind on remembrance of them, and so it came about that, instead of playing as she used to, she would sit still and silent, and her thoughts were far away, till everybody found fault with her for being a little dreamer. It happened that, as the counsellor was one day mending a clock in her father's house, Mary sat before the glass cupboard, deep in her dreams, looking at Nutcracker, and she could not help bursting out loud. "Ah, dear Herr Drosselmeyer, if you were really alive, I would not behave like Princess Pirlipat and despise you when you, for my sake, had ceased to be a handsome young man." "Eh? Eh? Silly stuff!" exclaimed the counsellor. Then at that moment came such a crack and a jerk that Mary tumbled fainting from her chair. When she came to herself again, her mother was petting her and saying, "How could you tumble from your chair? Such a big girl. Here is the nephew of the counsellor, come from Nuremberg, so you must be nice and well behaved." She looked up. The counsellor had again put on his glass wig and his drab coat, and was smiling very agreeably, and he held by the hand a small but well-formed young man. His little face was white and red as milk and blood, and he wore a fine red coat laced with gold. Oh, Wendy's just walked in. "Hello, Wendy." "Yeah, I'm reading." "Hello." She's whistling. There's something on my chair. Oh yes, his face was red and white as milk and blood, and he wore a fine coat laced with gold, white silk stockings and pumps. "Hello." And had stuck in his bosom a most beautiful nosegay. Oh, there's that thing again, a nosegay. And he was most elegantly curled and powdered, and behind his back his hair hung done up in a little bag. The little sword by his side seemed to be all jewels, and it glittered so, and the small hat under his arm was woven out of flakes of silk. Ooh. The young man lost no time in showing what pleasant manners he had, for he gave Mary a quantity of splendid playthings. That's Pam and Wendy having a bit of a do. Especially the most lovely toffee and some figures as the Mouse King had bitten to pieces. But for Fred, he had brought a wonderful fine sword. At table, the polite visitor cracked nuts for the whole party. The hoarders could not withstand him. With his right hand, he stuck them in his mouth, and with his left, he pulled up his head, and crack, the nut fell in pieces. He probably went something like this. Oh, right hand. Probably something like that. But with a nut. I had no nuts. Mary blushed rose red as she looked at the nice young man, and she became still redder when, after dinner, young Drosselmeyer invited her to go with him to the glass cupboard in the parlour. "Play prettily together then, children," said the counsellor. "I have no objection, as all my clocks are now in order." As soon as young Drosselmeyer found himself alone with Mary, he knelt upon one knee and spoke thus. "Ah, my dearest Miss Stahlbaum, you see here at your feet the fortunate man whose life you saved on this very spot. You were good enough to say that you would not despise me, as that nasty Princess Pirlipat did, if I became hideous for your sake. Now I am no more a common Nutcracker, but I have received again my original, not unpleasing, form. Oh, excellent young lady, bestow upon me your precious hand. Share with me my crown and kingdom. Reign with me in Rock Castle, for there now I am king." Mary raised the youth to his feet and said softly, "Dear Herr Drosselmeyer, you are a good-natured, kind-hearted man, and you also reign over a delightful land with very pretty, amusing people. So I take you for my husband." So then Mary and Drosselmeyer became at once betrothed. When the engagement had lasted a year, he is said to have fetched her away in a gold coach drawn by silver horses, and at the wedding danced 22,000 of the splendidest puppets, decked out in pearls and diamonds, and Mary is now queen of a country in which sparkling Christmas tree woods, transparent toffee palaces, and in short, the finest and most wonderful things are everywhere to be seen by those who will only have the eyes to see them. And so ends the story of Nutcracker, and the Mouse King. Well, there we are. It all ended happily ever after for Mary and young Herr Drosselmeyer, aka Nutcracker. Wasn't that a lovely little kind of a flight of fancy for Christmas? And Christmas is over and done with now. We're in the new year. So this will be the last time I will be wearing a Christmas jumper until next Christmas. They always come out. I'm just looking for Pam. I know she's around. And I was thinking, I don't know whether you've noticed, but here is, this is like a Nutcracker. Look. He's got a little wooden thing at the back, and his mouth opens and closes. It's not a proper one, but this is like a little model. So, from me, from Nutcracker, the Mouse King, and our little Christmas tree and the robins and all this, you look after yourselves. I'm sure that me and Sue will be back soon with something else, another story. We'll have a think on for you. Okie doke. Ta-ra. And don't forget to say cooey to people you know. Cooey!